I knew Iris Pembroke was not there by accident. The second, Calvin Price stopped smiling at me and started smiling at the empty chair beside him. The restaurant was private for surprises, quiet for mistakes, and my husband had chosen the corner table where laughter could be denied later. Iris arrived in a cream dress, calm enough to look invited into something that already belonged to her, then gave me a pitying smile. Calvin did not correct her tone, reach for my hand, or say my name. I kept my napkin folded across my lap while Warren Delaney looked down at his glass, because he heard it too. Iris eased into the chair. Calvin pulled out and glanced at me like I was the awkward part of her evening. Calvin told me you do not enjoy nights like this, she offered. So I am surprised you came. That was when I understood the table had been set for more than dinner, because my husband did not look shocked. He looked inconvenienced. I turned to Calvin and kept my voice low enough that nobody could pretend I was making a scene. Do you want to explain this here? Or should I let your guest do it for you? His jaw tightened. Not with guilt, but with embarrassment that I had spoken. Maeve, do not make tonight uncomfortable, he murmured, and Iris lowered her eyes like quiet made her innocent. The strange part was how calm I felt once he chose the room over me. I placed my napkin beside the plate, stood, and looked at the man I had spent years protecting from his carelessness. I am not staying here so you can make this look tasteful. Calvin. Warren went still, and Calvin reached for my wrist after everyone saw he should have reached sooner. I stepped back before his fingers touched me, walked out without raising my voice, and left him beside the woman taught to pity me. Outside the restaurant, Charleston air felt warm against my face, but my hands were steady when I called Lena Bradford. I did not give her a speech, only the facts, because facts were the only things that had not shifted under me. Iris sat down like she belonged there. Calvin did not deny it. Warren saw it, and Calvin asked me not to make the room uncomfortable. Lena stayed quiet. Then her first question landed harder than sympathy. Did he make sure you got home? That question followed me into the rideshare like a hand on my shoulder. Calvin could charm a room full of members. Remember a calm, every bourbon preference when someone important was watching. And still let his wife walk out alone after his affair partner made her feel like an inconvenience. My phone lit up before I reached home. First with, "Where are you?" Then Maeve, "We need to talk." Then, "Please do not tell Lena this was something it was not." I stared at the third message longest, because he was not worried about what happened to me. He was worried about the version of himself leaving that table. At home, I did not cry in the hallway or throw his clothes across the floor. I sat at the kitchen island and opened the thread where Calvin had asked me to fix the guest notes, remind him that Warren's client hated shellfish, and rewrite the welcome text he forgot to send Dana. The evidence was not dramatic, but it was everywhere, tucked into ordinary messages from a husband who liked being seen as effortless while I made sure nothing around him collapsed. Calvin came in late, smelling like expensive wine and wounded pride. "You embarrassed me tonight, Maeve," slipped out before any apology could. I looked at the man waiting for me to repair the damage he had made and asked, when Iris said, "You deserved someone lighter," "What did you expect me to do? Sit there and bless it?" His silence answered before his mouth could. By morning, Calvin was already trying to make the story smaller than the chair Iris had taken beside him. He texted Warren Delaney first. Not me, because Warren's opinion could still bruise the part of him he cared about. Maeve left before she understood what was happening. He wrote, and Iris got blamed for an awkward joke. Warren did not answer, and that silence carried more weight than any speech I could have given. I knew about the message because Lena called after Warren told her he was staying out of it, which in Charleston usually meant someone had seen enough to choose quietly. I did not ask her to defend me or call Iris anything ugly. I only sent Lena the messages Calvin had once sent me before dinners, the ones asking me to fix names, guest notes, and the little details he forgot while other people praised his ease. Seeing those words lined up made the night less confusing, because the man who called me dramatic had spent years making my labor look like his charm. Calvin called after lunch with a softer voice, the kind he used when he wanted apology to sound like maturity. Iris may have sounded too familiar, he admitted, but you cannot let one sentence ruin a marriage. I looked at his name glowing on my screen and thought about that table. Iris's pity, Warren's lowered eyes, and Calvin asking me not to make the room uncomfortable. It was not one sentence. Calvin. It was the husband sitting beside it. That evening, the first door closed without my hand on it. Warren canceled a private introduction Calvin had been waiting on, saying the group needed someone more careful with boundaries. At the club, Dana Whitlock heard two employees mention Calvin bringing Iris into guest spaces after hours. And suddenly the affair was not only private embarrassment anymore. When Calvin came home angry and asked if I had talked to Warren, I told the truth. No. Calvin. People are allowed to believe what they saw before you could explain it all away. Iris did not come at me with shouting, because shouting would have made her too easy to dismiss. She posted a photo of 2 wine glasses, a corner of white tablecloth, and a caption about choosing peace over drama. She never used Calvin's name or mine. But Charleston did not need names when the right people had seen the same dinner. Lena sent it with one sentence. She is trying to make you look like the storm. I stared at the photo longer than I meant to. Not because of the caption, but because of what Iris had left in the corner. Beside the bottle sample was a temporary guest card from Calvin's club, the kind Dana Whitlock did not like outside member spaces. Iris worked for a wine importer, and that card made the post look less like romance and more like a vendor using private access to polish herself. I did not reply, did not post, and did not give her the fight she had dressed up as Grace. Instead, I saved the post, timestamp, and profile name, then sent it to Miles Archer with a plain question about what I should keep. He called back and kept his voice practical. Keep what is public. Do not message her. Do not threaten anyone. And do not touch anything you are not allowed to access. For the first time since dinner, restraint did not feel like swallowing pain. It felt like putting my hands back on my own life. By late afternoon, Iris's polished caption had traveled farther than she intended. A younger employee at the club showed Dana the post and asked if vendors were allowed to use guest access for personal hints online. Dana did not care who Calvin loved, but she cared that his private mess had stepped into the place where the club sold discretion. Iris was told her tastings would pause until boundaries were reviewed. And when Calvin called her, I heard his voice from the hallway turn thin. What did you say to Maeve? Iris pressed, and Calvin had no answer strong enough for the woman who thought he had handled me. I met Miles Archer in a small office that smelled like coffee and paper. Not victory. I did not walk in asking how to hurt Calvin, because hurting him would have made him the center again. Miles listened while I laid out the dinner. Iris's post, the guest card, Calvin's messages, and Warren's willingness to confirm what he saw. Then he folded his hands and said, We keep this clean. Maeve, because clean is what keeps you safe. He explained South Carolina, without turning my marriage into a courtroom fantasy. Affairs could matter in the right circumstances, especially before a formal agreement, but only if the proof was lawful and the person holding it stayed steady. Keep public posts. Keep your own messages. Keep names of witnesses, he said, but do not touch his private phone. Do not threaten Iris, and do not put grief online. I nodded because, for once, the rules did not feel like a cage. They felt like a door I could walk through without crawling. That night, I made a folder on my laptop and named it with nothing dramatic. Just separation documents. I saved Calvin's texts asking me to fix guest notes, the dinner reservation under his name, Iris's public caption, and the message where he asked me not to tell Lena it was what it looked like. There were no hidden recordings. No stolen passwords. No ugly screenshot dump for strangers to cheer at. Just the plain trail of a man who wanted a wife at home, a woman at his table, and sympathy when both started costing him. Calvin received the letter 2 days later and called before I had finished my coffee. "You are really doing this over dinner." Maeve came out sharp, then softer when I did not answer fast enough. I looked at the steam rising from my mug and let the silence do what my explanations never could. Dinner was where you forgot to hide it. Calvin, not where it started. And when he began saying Iris misunderstood him too, I told him he could explain that to his lawyer from now on. Not through me. Calvin tried to pull the room back toward him the way he always had, with lowered voices and favors wrapped like friendship. Warren met him for coffee and listened while Calvin called the dinner a misunderstanding, then called Iris intense, then called me sensitive without using the word. Warren did not argue because the facts were between them. Iris had spoken like a woman promised a seat, and Calvin had let her. I heard from Lena, who said Warren sounded tired of pretending. By afternoon, Calvin was sitting across from Dana Whitlock at the club, where Charm had less room to breathe. Dana had Iris's public post, the guest card in the photo, and 2 employees who remembered seeing Calvin bring her through spaces meant for members and vendors. "This is not about your marriage, Calvin," Dana told him, which made it worse because he could not turn it into a private wound. "This is about discretion. And right now, you are making discretion look optional," Iris called before dinner, and I heard his voice from the hallway shift from confident to careful. She wanted to know why her tastings had paused, why Dana was using words like boundaries, and why Calvin had not been as free as he sounded. "You told me it was basically over," she said, and the pause after that was longer than any denial. Calvin answered that things were complicated, and for the first time, complicated did not sound deep. It sounded like a man caught between 2 versions. Nobody gave a speech. Nobody needed one. And that was what Calvin hated most. Warren pulled back his introductions. Dana reviewed his access. Iris started protecting her name. And Lena stopped softening mine when people asked, what happened? I did not have to chase the story through Charleston, because Calvin had left enough of it in front of people who understood quiet damage. When he came home and asked why everyone was acting different, I looked at his loosened tie and said, "They are not acting different, Calvin. They are done helping you look the same." Calvin asked to meet me in the lobby of my hotel because he thought familiar ground would make me softer. He arrived dressed like the man people trusted. Navy jacket. Clean shave. Wedding ring on. His face arranged into concern. I had seen that face at member receptions, where he needed someone to believe he was steadier than he was. He did not start with "I am sorry." He started with, "Maeve, this has gone far enough." I let him sit across from me because the lobby was public. Quiet. And mine. Calvin Singh lowered his voice and explained that Warren had pulled back. Dana had taken him off a private guest rotation, and Iris was furious because her tastings were frozen. He talked about lost trust like weather that had rolled in without cause. Then he leaned closer and said I could fix it if I told people the dinner had been misunderstood. I asked him what he wanted me to say, and for the first time, he looked relieved. "Tell Warren it was awkward. Not serious. Tell Dana Iris was only there socially. Tell Lena you were emotional and left before I could explain." Each sentence landed like a receipt, because none of them asked me to tell the truth, only to make his version usable again. I looked at the man I had once coached through apologies, corrected through forgotten names, and softened in rooms where people mistook my cleanup for his character. That was the twist he never saw coming. I had not ruined his pride. I had only stopped lending my name to it. When I slid the signed separation papers across the table, his eyes moved to the envelope before they moved back to me. By the next evening, the damage he wanted me to erase had settled into plain consequences. Dana kept him away from guests who expected discretion. Iris was moved out of the Charleston tasting schedule, and Warren stopped offering Calvin as the man who could handle a difficult room. Calvin called twice, then texted that I was letting people destroy him. I wrote back once, "No, Calvin. They are meeting you without me standing in the way." Calvin did not disappear after the papers moved forward, and that made the ending feel more real. He stayed in Charleston, kept his job, and learned what it meant to work in rooms where people still smiled but no longer handed him trust for free. Dana kept him away from guests who expected discretion. Warren stopped offering his name as a shortcut, and Lena stopped translating my quiet into weakness. Iris kept her position too, but her tastings stayed paused long enough for every polite table to remember why. Miles Archer handled the separation without theater, and I kept every step clean because I wanted a life, not a scene. Calvin sent one last message after meeting his attorney. "I never thought you would take it this far." I read it beside boxes in my new apartment, where afternoon light hit the floor without crossing his shoes. "You still think I destroyed your pride?" I wrote back. I only stopped standing under it to hold it up. After that, I stopped checking who still spoke to him and started noticing who spoke to me. A guest asked for my judgment without mentioning Calvin. Dana sent a note thanking me for keeping boundaries clean, and Lena brought takeout to my living room like it was home. Months later, a man at a quiet dinner asked where I wanted to sit before touching the chair, and I almost laughed at how small respect looked when real. I did not need a perfect ending, only one that finally belonged to me. If this story stayed with you, let it stay in the right place. Not as anger, but as proof that peace can begin when you stop repairing someone who keeps handing you the damage. Some endings are not loud. They are honest enough to let you breathe again.